When the boy first met the Emperor, he excitedly called her a little Lolita. The main character, Kanu, was originally a hikikomori. Because he correctly answered 200 anime-related questions in a row, he was formally employed by a suspicious company. As expected, after drinking a beverage handed to him by an old man, he immediately passed out. When he woke up, he saw a strange ceiling, and beside him was a shivering maid. Kanu was attracted by the beauty of the maid, Foaran, and he praised her wildly. He was so excited that he made a sleazy face, but because of the language barrier, Foaran didn't understand what he was saying. Then Foaran handed him a ring and gestured for him to put it on. It turned out to be a translation ring that allowed both parties to understand each other's language. Just as Kanu was asking where he was, a beautiful woman suddenly appeared behind him to answer. But he was distracted by her graceful figure and bluntly asked if she was a G-Cup. It turns out she was a first-class soldier of the Land Self-Defense Force, assigned to be Kanu's personal bodyguard. This situation teaches us never to accept food from strangers, or else we might end up in another world. Just when Kanu was feeling very confused, the old man who drugged him showed up. It turns out the old man was a high-ranking official directly under the cabinet office. He told Kanu that people had discovered a strange hole at Mount Fuji, which turned out to be connected to a world called the Eldant Empire. Therefore, the government sent an expedition team to make contact with the people of the empire, and after negotiations, a friendly agreement was reached. The company Kanu interviewed for was the first joint venture funded by both Japan and the empire. So now Kanu is the head of Amatic, and his job is to export anime, manga, and games to the culturally backward empire. Kanu wanted to refuse decisively, but unfortunately he did not know the way back. With no choice, he could only enjoy the situation. In the evening, Foaran brought him tea and snacks, and she was so terrified just because her ears were showing. Half-elves are not well regarded, so she feared Kanu would punish her. However, for Kanu, this was actually a point in his favor, so Foaran's worries did not come to pass. Later, after learning that Foaran was illiterate, Kanu wrote her a hiragana chart, and her grateful actions made Kanu's heart swell with emotion. The next day, Kanu woke up, fixed his hair, hid his morning erection, and then let Foaran come in to serve him. There's no helping it. Nobility life is just so unglamorous. After breakfast, Kanu followed the old man to the palace to meet the emperor. Since he didn't know the protocol, he could only follow the old man's example of bowing his head as he walked, then mimicking his action of kneeling on one knee. However, after 2.5 seconds, Kanu heard the voice of Emperor Petralka and curiously raised his head. What he saw was a little Lolita. He immediately got excited. After a moment of silence for 2.5 seconds, everyone exclaimed at Kanu's boldness, but the emperor was not pleased. Despite her petite size and doll-like appearance, she was a real 16-year-old young woman, and she hated being called a Lolita. Therefore, she decided to have Kanu beheaded to show the public. He originally came to spread otaku culture, but now he finds his life in danger. Fortunately, the old man was clever enough to use the fact that one is considered an adult at the age of 20 as an excuse, portraying Kanu's remark as love and respect for the emperor. After a barrage of flattery, Petralka was completely taken in. However, the boy, who narrowly escaped with his life, then turned around and called the emperor's cousin a fool just because the cousin said otaku culture was harmful. He fearlessly countered the authority. At this, Petralka suddenly laughed because she appreciated the boy's courage, which suited her taste, so she agreed to the spread of otaku culture. After obtaining the emperor's permission, Kanu asked the old man about his job duties, but he received a frustrating answer. We're not sure how to go about it. Left with no choice, he had to figure it out on his own. But now there was a problem. The language barrier would greatly reduce the joy that animations and such could bring to the residents of this other world, posing a hindrance to the spread of otaku culture. Kanu, unable to sleep because of this issue, simply gave up on finding a solution, as flirting with Foaran was his priority. From then on, during the day he selected works that would captivate the other world, and at night, he flirted with Foaran in the kitchen. After several busy days, a room filled with anime was created. Petralka suddenly came for an inspection, and seeing the room full of manga and other items, she became very interested but could not understand any of it. She then kicked everyone else out, and had Kanu translate the content for her. In this way, Kanu found himself caught between Petralka and the half-elf Foran, playing the role of mediator. However, while they were halfway through a manga, Kanu and Foran got carried away chatting, leaving the Emperor ignored, which made Petralka very jealous. So, she sat on Kanu's lap, haughtily stating that this way she could see the manga better, then ordered Foran to make tea. She left satisfied only as the sun set. But when Kanu returned to his room, he was startled by a pair of crimson eyes and started swinging wildly, until he realized it was a servant and immediately apologized. Unexpectedly, the servant pulled out a wooden stick, saying that if he was going to be hit, it should be with this. Hearing the noise, Foran rushed in. Kanu quickly dropped the stick, saying he hadn't bullied the servant. But Foran wasn't concerned about that. She cared only about Kanu's bruised fist, because it's normal in this world for nobles to hit servants, making Kanu acutely aware of the differences between the two worlds. The next day, Kanu went to the town and saw children being trained by soldiers because non-humans had no civil rights, and joining the army was the quickest career path. He then learned from the servant that Foran had also joined the army as a child and was very good at attack magic. Watching the training young girls made him think of Foran as a child. Minori warned him not to get too involved. Later, Kanu gave a manga to the children and asked what they usually played. But the children said they had no time to play as they helped with farm work on non-training days. And in this world, books were luxury items only accessible to scholars and nobles. The children's response left him stunned because this made spreading otaku culture very difficult. After returning to the mansion, Kanu was sat on by Petralka on his lap while she read a book. However, just when Petralka reached an exciting part of the book, they were interrupted by Foran, who came to serve tea. This made Petralka very angry, and she scolded Foran in front of Kanu in an unpleasant manner. This reminded Kanu of being dismissed by others arbitrarily. Just as Petralka was about to throw a loaf of bread at Foran, Kanu intervened. With furrowed brows, Petralka and Foran were both taken aback. Kanu, realizing that in this world it is normal to reprimand servants, took the bread from Petralka's hand and began to talk to her with a smile about the concept of equality, hoping she could understand it. Although Petralka did not know what equality meant, she decided to forgive Foran, impressed by Kanu's courage to advise her despite the risks. Then she asked Kanu to teach her Japanese and warned Foran not to run away. In the evening, Minori felt that Kanu was getting too involved in this world, so she wanted to have a serious chat with him. He had built a school to help the residents of the otherworld understand otaku culture. However, on the first day of school, Kanu and his group were attacked by a group of nationalist soldiers. They took Petralka hostage and tied up Kanu and his companions. They believed that Kanu was promoting psychological aggression by teaching literacy and building schools for non-humans and humans to study together, something they would never allow because they felt that non-humans should live under human rule. Therefore, they decided to kill Kanu and even brought a magical weapon that could easily turn the school to ashes. Just as Kanu was about to be beheaded, Petralka threatened that Kanu was just a nobody, and even if they killed him, Japan would send someone else. But if they died, she would portray them as tragic heroes, making the citizens hate the nationalist soldiers for slaughtering peaceful envoys. Under Petralka's threat, the enemies indeed put down their weapons and threw Kanu out, inadvertently giving him a favor. However, just as Kanu was about to get up, Minori asked him to dig in a bit more. It turned out that Minori had learned from Fujiko to hide a knife pen in her cleavage and wanted Kanu to retrieve it. Now everything was ready except for the opportunity. Looking at the clock, Kanu suddenly had a brilliant idea. He twisted his body, pretending to be in urgent need of a restroom, convincing the enemies to take him. Annoyed by his behavior, they escorted him. However, as they walked, Kanu suddenly stopped when his phone alarm, set for 8 p.m., went off, intending to draw out the enemies in the room. He then falsely claimed that his spell was complete, warning the enemies not to move. However, his ploy was seen through by Alessio. Just in the nick of time, Minori appeared and saved the day with her agile moves, striking down 3 enemies and rescuing Kanu. Then Foran launched an attack spell, emitting a brilliant green light and releasing a massive amount of energy, almost annihilating the enemy. Although Foran's magic was strong, Alessio survived and immediately launched an expulsion flame, intending to die together with Kanu and the others. Just then, a stream of water came, successfully extinguishing the expulsion flame. Alessio was dumbfounded, wondering what kind of weapon it was. Kanu explained it was a fire extinguisher, and Alessio was instantly terrified of this new weapon. After being punched, Alessio unexpectedly pulled out a short sword from his backpack in a last attempt to kill the Emperor as he fell. Blood splattered, leaving everyone in shock. It turned out that Foaren blocked the knife for Petralka. Can you believe it? The content taught by the teacher was actually Zetai Ryoiki, which in otaku culture refers to the visible thigh area between a super short skirt and over-knee socks. This barely visible sensual skin can make boys dream of beautiful things. Thus it's called the sacred and inviolable, absolute territory. The next term is not wearing, which here doesn't mean actually not wearing anything, but is left for you to imagine. The most representative of this is the dim-witted goddess Aqua, so this term represents the ultimate wardrobe malfunction. However, because his content was too provocative, Minori had to replace him to prevent him from further shocking the students. Unexpectedly, Minori turned out to be an oddball herself, starting off teaching the top in a relationship. No one expected her to be a legendary fujoshi, and she even started teaching about boys' love right off the bat. Neither of them was normal. After school, as the two were heading home, they detected suspicious figures lurking near the mansion. Minori, armed with a gun, went to capture them and soon apprehended a beast-eared girl who was drawing. Later, Minori deduced that the beast-eared girl, Erbia, was a spy from an enemy country and handed her over to the knights. Seeing Erbia's pleading eyes, Kanu felt compelled to help, so he decided to save Erbia. The next day, he went to the palace to plead for Erbia's case with the emperor. Petralka, however, got jealous and questioned Kanu if the girl had big breasts, suspecting that he was protecting her because of that. Kanu immediately countered that her breasts were not big at all, and she was a flat-chested girl. Petralka gave him a disdainful look, sensing trouble. When Erbia appeared, Petralka sarcastically asked Kanu, "Is this what you call flat-chested? Your standards are really strict." Seeing this situation, Kanu decided not to pretend anymore. He firmly stated, "I want to keep her by my side. You suspect her of being a spy, right? I'll clear her name now." He then gave Erbia a knowing look and questioned her. "You're a wandering artist, right?" The girl claimed to be an artist from the east, but when Minori mentioned that the enemy country was in the east, Kanu quickly argued to the emperor that this wasn't proof. He then asked Erbia, "You draw because you love it, right?" and winked at her frantically. Although Erbia understood his intention, because she was naive, she inadvertently revealed that she had been copying military bases and reporting on them. Everyone fell silent upon hearing this. Kanu also expressed that he was completely unable to handle the situation. Frustrated, Kanu blurted out his true feelings. "She has cute beast ears and a tail. How can I not forgive her? I just want to touch her body." As he spoke, he unconsciously began fantasizing. Hearing this, Petralka asked Kanu if he intended to keep her as a mistress. Minori countered, saying Kanu had no such intentions because he and her cousin were lovers. Just like that, a couple pairing was formed. Foaren blushed at the side, while Minori continued to spread her BL culture. Curious, Foaren asked Minori what top meant. Minori unreservedly explained to her that top is used to describe the dominant role in a male-male relationship. Seeing this, Kanu asked Minori not to spread misinformation. Suddenly, he had an epiphany on how to save Erbia. The idea was to make her a double agent responsible for passing false information. This way, the enemy country would act according to our plans. Under Kanu's eloquent persuasion, Erbia became his personal artist, much to his delight. Seeing their closeness, Petralka was very displeased and declared she would castrate Kanu. Kanu sensed trouble. That day, the boy blew the whistle to start the game. Immediately, guards smashed the ground with one foot and shot the ball directly from midfield into the goal. The boy was shocked. He had not expected the dwarves' strength to be so formidable, sweeping the field with sheer brute force. Neither the human wall erected by the opponents nor the last line of defense, the goalkeeper, could withstand her violent soccer. They were like chickens and dogs in front of her, utterly unreasonable. This match, intended to eliminate racial issues through friendship, turned into a one-sided crushing by the dwarves. Guard's kicks were so powerful that the opposing players were helpless. As the whistle for the end of the first half blew, the dwarves led the elves by 50 points, taunting them as they left the field, which upset Minori, a supporter of the elves. She approached Kanu with a request to allow the use of magic. Kanu outright refused, but unexpectedly, the dwarves agreed, because they felt that even if the elves used magic, they would not be a match for them. Since repairing the field would take time, everyone began to eat lunch. Unexpectedly, Petralka got some rice on her face. As Foiran was about to remove it, Kanu suddenly stopped her, believing that the correct approach when a beautiful girl has rice on her face is to take it off and eat it. Petralka, flattered by his reference to her as a beautiful girl, blushed and let Kanu remove and eat the rice. If you're interested, you might try the same with a beautiful girl. She might eat your rice too, but you need to be very handsome. Otherwise, it might not end well. Seeing this, Gallius thought it was an interesting custom. The second half of the game was about to start. As the whistle blew, Guard kicked off powerfully again. Faced with the rapidly approaching soccer ball, the elves used magic to summon a giant hand, successfully blocking the ball. Then, they blew the horn for a counterattack. Several elves flew into the sky, executing a special move. The ball landed, causing a huge cloud of dust. Does this attacking scene look familiar? Yes. Whether it's the goalkeeper's giant hand or the forward's combined finishing move, they are all from Inazuma 11. Now it was the elves' turn to throw disdainful glances at Guard. As the game continued, it was still soccer, but the players started to get heated, and the soccer match directly evolved into a war. Kanu, watching this unfold, wondered if he had made a mistake, as he hadn't expected a friendship match meant to deepen bonds between races to turn into such a spectacle. However, as Kanu was blaming himself, Erbia suddenly burst onto the field, juggling the stolen soccer ball. Petralka, in a burst of enthusiasm, changed outfits in a second and joined the game, snatching the ball from under Erbia's feet. Seeing her beloved ball taken, Erbia bared her teeth and chased after her. Petralka then called for Foran's help. Foran, upon hearing this, immediately used magic to send Petralka flying into the air and directed a hurricane to carry Petralka to the goal. Afterwards, Petralka lifted her short legs and took a shot at goal. Following that, a slow-moving soccer ball rolled right into the net. Petralka, seeing this, was overjoyed and high-fived Foran to celebrate. However, this action surprised the nobles and soldiers, because the emperor, who stood at the pinnacle of the social hierarchy, was showing closeness with a discriminated half-elf, which completely shocked their traditional views. Kanu was pleased to see this because it meant his efforts were not in vain. Although it was a small step, it gave him hope for improving relations between different races. Since being tricked into this other world to spread otaku culture, Kanu had not returned home. However, these days, all the discs shipped from Earth turned out to be pirated, which was intolerable for him as a seasoned hikikomori. Thus, he decided to go shopping himself. But as the portal to the other world was a state secret, the old man was troubled. Kanu then suggested, "Just give me a sleeping pill and send me out. That's all." After getting permission, Kanu told Foiran that he needed to return to Earth for a while. Both showed expressions of reluctance to part. He had wanted to take Foiran with him, but the old man said that Earth's air was not suitable for residents of the other world. They would surely die there. On the day of departure, Foiran excused herself under the pretext of packing and disappeared from sight. Meanwhile, Kanu, having taken the sleeping pill, quickly fell into a deep sleep. In his dream, he not only saw Foiran in a naked apron, but also dreamt of Petralka and Erbia completely naked. This beautiful dream made him not want to wake up, but when his cousin, also in a naked apron, appeared, he was frightened and immediately left the dream. Upon waking, he found himself under a familiar ceiling and felt nostalgic. Then, he noticed an extra item among his luggage, leading to the scene at the beginning. Kanu anxiously asked Foran if she felt any abnormalities. When he learned there was nothing wrong, he realized he had been tricked. That crafty old man was indeed very cunning. Meanwhile, Foran, who had been holding it in, said she needed to use the restroom. But when she tried the bidet button out of curiosity, Kanu heard her scream the next second. For Foran, who had just arrived on Earth, everything was new and intriguing. Seeing this, Kanu decided to take her out on a date. Thus, Foran experienced many firsts, Her first subway ride, her first visit to Aokigahara, her first taste of wasabi, her first time catching a plush toy, and her first omuris. Foran was especially happy that day, and these experiences became unforgettable memories for her. Back home, Kanu was restless, because being alone with a beautiful girl at night inevitably led to some indecent thoughts. Worried about not being able to control himself, especially after learning that Foran hadn't brought any undergarments, he made up an excuse to go to the supermarket to cool his heated mind. However, when he saw the panties he intended to buy, his desires surged again. After paying, he ran out of the supermarket and then stumbled upon a vending machine selling adult products. Could today be the day he lost his virginity? Fortunately, in the end, reason overcame desire. Just when he had finally calmed down, he overheard a young couple discussing intimate matters. It seemed like the whole world was assisting his urges. Thus, his desire reignited, he rushed back home, ready to spend 3 days and 3 nights with Foran. However, Foran was already asleep. After he carried her to bed, just as his wandering hands were about to touch her white thighs, Foran's sleep-talking brought him back to his senses. The struggle between reason and desire was torturous. After he covered Foran with a blanket, he left the room. The next day, after waking up from the other world, he realized he hadn't bought anything he was supposed to, so the old man gave him a good scolding. However, Kanu shamelessly pointed out that there was still a gain because Foran had successfully learned how to make omuris. This girl, who looked like a doll and was petite in stature, was actually the Empress governing a nation. Yet, now she wanted to become a hikikomori, which greatly worried her ministers. With no other options, they sought help from their allies, and Kanu, an expert in this area, was tasked with persuading Petralka. However, instead of persuading her, Kanu educated her on what being a true hikikomori entails. First, a hikikomori's room is very small, and secondly, manga and games must be within arm's reach. This is the true setting for an otaku's room. As someone who had lived that life, Kanu not only let Petralka fully experience the life of lying around at home, but also taught her the insights of a hikikomori. The first point was that staying home is the proof of being a winner and gaining freedom. The second was that it's all the world's fault and not mine. And the third was that I just haven't tried my hardest yet. In the evening, Petralka asked Kanu to accompany her to the bath. However, the bathhouse was guarded by soldiers, so Kanu pulled out a risque magazine from his pocket and threw it on the ground as bait. The next second, the 2 guards were distracted by the book, allowing Petralka to sneak into the bathhouse. She then questioned Kanu, "Aren't you really going to persuade me?" Kanu replied, "If it were easy to persuade you, we wouldn't be in this situation. As someone who has been there, I understand the feeling, so all I can do is stay by your side." After the bath, Petralka planned to return to her room to continue playing games. But when she passed the guards, she heard them expressing concern for her, which made her feel guilty. Back in her room, Petralka asked Kanu if she was a poor emperor for ignoring her duties and causing trouble for her subjects out of sheer whimsy. Kanu comforted her, saying, "Although I'm not clear about the matters of an emperor, I think you should just follow your heart and be yourself." Kanu's words enlightened Petralka, and she pushed open the heavy doors to embrace a new beginning. Her ministers were shocked yet relieved. 5 knowledgeable scholars, gathered in a dark room, were researching what swimsuit the emperor should wear. One suggested a school swimsuit, but the speaker laughed at the idea because the emperor was a 16-year-old girl and surely wouldn't wear such a childish swimsuit. After a heated debate, the gentleman concluded that as a noble emperor, she should not wear anything too revealing. The swimsuit must be black to highlight her dignity, but because all black would seem too monotonous, there should be some white near the chest area. It turned out that the only swimsuit that met these requirements was a school swimsuit. To everyone's surprise, he smiled. That day, after learning that Kanu was planning a beach vacation, Petralka quickly handled a large amount of official business and ordered her ministers to pick out the most suitable swimsuit for herself, leading to the scene described at the beginning. Meanwhile, on an endless white sandy beach, Minori changed into a sexy black bikini. Her curvaceous figure made Kanu immediately worship the gods, thanking Buddha for being born in this world. Then, turning his head, he saw Erbia energetically digging holes in the sand. Kanu chuckled. She really is like a little dog. However, her digging posture led Kanu's thoughts to wander. And what truly captivated him was none other than Fawaran. Her graceful figure and bashful demeanor made her seem like a fairy of the beach, mesmerizing Kanu so much that he clenched his fists, feeling as if he was born for this very day. What followed was a crowd-pleasing sequence. Kanu shamelessly flirted with Minori and frolicked with Fawaran by the sea, fully reclaiming his lost youth amidst an atmosphere filled with joy. Suddenly, a student ran up in a panic, informing everyone that his companion had been killed. It turned out that after hearing the teacher was going to the beach, he and Guard had followed but encountered suspicious figures along the way. Guard tried to catch them, but was struck by the enemy's electric shock magic. Hearing this, Minori immediately opened the weapon box, ready to engage the enemy. Her battle plan was as follows. First, she had Urbia use her sense of smell to locate the enemy and catch them off guard. Then, the elves hiding nearby would use magic to incapacitate the straggling enemies, with Urbia finishing them off. Their teamwork was seamless, and they successfully subdued the enemy. However, when they found Guard, they realized she had only been stunned. While they were distracted, the enemy quickly broke out of the encirclement. Urbia, acting impulsively, chased after them and fell right into the enemy's trap. Fortunately, Fawaran followed and used pitfall magic to trap the fleeing enemy. But just as she let her guard down, a figure sprang out from behind and wrestled her to the ground. At that moment, the physically weak Kanu rushed over. Although he was no fighter, he couldn't bear to see Fawaran hurt, and he was prepared to risk his life to save her. However, his heroism lasted only 3 seconds before Minori's gunshot scared the enemy into surrendering. Unexpectedly, the enemy turned out to be members of the self-defense forces. Fawaran then threw herself into Kanu's arms, deeply moved by his risky attempt to save her. But just then, Fawaran's swimsuit suddenly came off. Kanu was stunned by the scene before him. As one might guess, Kanu, at the cost of half his life, got to appreciate a magnificent body, and it was all worth it. The reason the self-defense forces were there was because they had been assigned to protect them. But Minori had a question. Why didn't they reveal their identities when discovered? It was only when they saw the high-specification telephoto cameras on them that they realized it was all to satisfy their personal desires. Without waiting for the men to explain, Minori reprimanded them. The next morning, the boy woke up with a flushed face because the sexy Minori before him was simply too beautiful, especially her impressive bust, which seemed ready to burst forth. So, it was hard for him not to be moved. It turned out that Minori was dressed like this because Fawaran had taken her clothes to wash, and the one she was wearing got accidentally stained with milk. Therefore, she had to wear a smaller maid outfit. At that moment, the button on Minori's chest could no longer withstand the pressure, burst open due to her ample bust, and hit Kanu right in the eyes. In his flustered state, he accidentally grabbed Minori's bust. Truly the luck of the protagonist. Wouldn't you be envious? At that moment, the old man suddenly appeared, bringing bad news. It turned out that the video of the friendly soccer match from the otherworld had accidentally been leaked by the military and had caused a huge stir online. The internet, never short of experts, already had zealots using equipment and unit badges as clues to pinpoint specific military units. If the existence of the otherworld was exposed, all their plans would go up in smoke. Upon hearing this, Kanu quickly devised a solution. He first issued a statement online claiming that the leaked video was part of a super entertainment blockbuster made by the military. Then, he began producing follow-up content. The plot was simple. It blatantly copied various famous works, combining them into a brand new film. Once the film was released, the original creators would surely come forward to protest, and the film would be permanently banned due to plagiarism issues. This would avert the crisis regarding the otherworld. After several months of filming, the movie was perfectly completed. That evening, the film crew gathered to watch the finished product. However, this was likely a social death scene for the actors, as acting and watching oneself act are not the same. Petralka knew this as she watched the film unfold, making her face cringe. She could hardly believe that the immature voice of Petralka was her own, which was utterly embarrassing. A true dark history. The subsequent scenes, filled with cringeworthy dialogue and special gestures, made her blush on the spot. Just as things seemed to be getting back on track, trouble followed. The supply of manga was dwindling, causing a hunger among the residents. People fought over manga in class and even skipped work to read them. To resolve this issue, Kanu asked the old man to order a large quantity of manga, but he was refused. It turned out this was exactly what the old man had hoped for. A shocking secret was then revealed. He was not a philanthropist, but an invader. Kanu immediately understood the government's intentions. The otherworld was an unexplored treasure trove that the government wanted to monopolize. Deploying the military would draw other countries' attention, so the government opted for cultural invasion instead. Undoubtedly, Kanu became the vanguard. Introducing the underdeveloped otherworld to the potent culture of the second dimension was akin to deploying a bacterial weapon, capable of infecting many at once. Once their values were gradually distorted, the government would impose restrictions on sales, making them obedient. Kanu was furious and deeply disdained the government's approach. However, the old man pointed out, "You seem to have missed the essence of the matter. You know this is a state secret, right? This means anyone who obstructs the plan will be dealt with secretly. Don't think I chose you because you're deeply versed in otaku culture. No. I chose you because you meet a strict requirement. Even if you suddenly disappeared from this world, it wouldn't feel out of place." This revelation was a huge blow to Kanu. He hadn't expected to be an invader, much less expendable cannon fodder who could be replaced at any time. After returning home, Kanu locked himself in his room and reverted to being a hikikomori. But the old man wasn't like his parents. He threatened Kanu that if he didn't continue to spread otaku culture, the only path left for him would be a dead end. Late at night, Kanu, hearing noises outside, took an oil lamp to check and discovered Foran preparing a midnight snack for him. On the table, there was also an omuris with encouraging words written on it, which deeply moved him. Although he wasn't very hungry, he still finished the omuris. Afterwards, he nervously told Foran that he was actually an invader and shouldn't be with them. Foran responded that she was slow to understand his meaning, but since his arrival, she had learned to read and write, encountered interesting manga and animations, played soccer with Petralka, and even starred in a movie. All these were gifts he brought to her, so she pleaded with him not to speak such sad words and tearfully begged Kanu to stay. Kanu, moved by Foran's words, regained his spirits. The next day, he went early to meet with the emperor. The old man thought Kanu had come around, but Kanu surprised him with a bold move that left the old man dumbfounded. Kanu suggested to Petralka that the empire should start creating its own comics and anime, presenting materials to prove that the empire could be self-sufficient. Petralka, seeing Kanu's determined eyes, grinned and agreed to the plan. Those present knew what this meant and gave Kanu a warm round of applause. But this was undoubtedly a slap in the government's face, prompting the squint-eyed old man to harbor murderous intentions. The state deployed special forces just to assassinate a single otaku because he proposed that the empire produce its own manga and anime, which undoubtedly threatened government interests. That night, several special forces soldiers sneaked into the mansion under cover of darkness and pulled out thermal imagers to locate their target. But just as they were about to strike, laughter from a girl came from the bed. Indeed, the special forces had fallen into a trap. Kanu had foreseen the government's malice and had prepared an ambush. The reason the thermal imagers didn't detect the women around was that they used ice magic to lower their body temperatures. Suddenly, Foran on the bed sprang into action, instantly taking down one special forces soldier. The next second, the other two, realizing what was happening, opened fire, but the bullets were completely blocked by a protective shield. The political assassination attempt ended in failure. Unexpectedly, the government then blamed the assassination on extremists and promised a thorough investigation, issuing a light apology to Kanu and casually brushing off the incident. This blatant lying left Kanu utterly astonished. Later, to protect Kanu, Petralka assigned him several combat-ready maid. Whether going to school or sleeping, they were always by his side, almost developing feelings due to their closeness. The day maid was moved from Kanu's side. The school suddenly caught fire. Although he knew it was a trap, he had to risk it to save the books. Arriving at the school, he pulled out a 1.8-meter-long pair of giant scissors and rushed into the inferno without looking back. But when he reached the library, he was ambushed by special forces who used a chloroform-soaked handkerchief to knock him out. Simultaneously, the mansion's servants rushed to help, but the main entrance was engulfed in flames. They ran to the back of the school where a lizard man, using his sturdy body, broke through the wall. However, being heat-sensitive, he could only stay behind to assist. Unfortunately, the two who rushed in immediately ran into the special forces. Erbia, without hesitation, attacked first, quickly subduing the two and directing Foran to rescue Kanu. After Foran found Kanu, she tried to wake him up, but suddenly a bookshelf collapsed. In the nick of time, Foran used a protective shield to successfully block it. On the other side, Erbia was entangled in a fight with special forces. Although she was agile and quick to react, her lack of real combat experience was evident. At a critical moment, she was taken by surprise by a taser gun from the special forces. Just as she was about to be shot, Minori arrived just in time to save her and managed to rescue Kanu and Foran just as the protective shield was about to disappear. However, they were surrounded by flames and had no choice but to jump out the window. Erbia placed her hand on the window for just a second, and although Kanu escaped, the ordeal was not over. Determined to prevent such incidents from recurring, Kanu decided to negotiate with the government. The negotiations began the next day, but the officials claimed Kanu had a mental disorder and suggested he return for treatment. However, Kanu was not a naive child. Complying blindly could mean being conveniently eliminated on the way back, possibly even being hit by a truck. So Kanu used reverse psychology and successfully tricked the official into revealing the real culprit behind the school fire the previous night. Their conversation was overheard by Petralka, leaving the government with no room for excuses. Afterward, Petralka boldly declared that if Kanu disappeared from the empire, she would sever diplomatic relations with the government forever. Kanu played this hand beautifully, and it also laid the foundation for his future harem. From then on, he lived a shameless life with Foran and Petralka,